So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM Michelle. And this week, we're going to continue on the series from Bryan Stevenson on the talk that Roko had attended at the Prescaney conference on the power of the human experience, And this week is going to be on the power of getting uncomfortable. And yes, there are a number of quotes. we're gonna kick off with one that's almost like the combo of uncomfortable and Disney. So it's like outside your comfort zone is where the magic happens. And so it's when you think about the power of being uncomfortable and the magic happens, I think this is where, and Roko and I have looked at it, where growth actually happens. And I think about all those moments that I went and thought, holy cow, okay. But when you step into it and you experience it, my experience has been, it's far less fearful, uncomfortable, awkward, whatever it is, than what I thought it would be, imagined it would be. And on the other side of it, and it could be those difficult conversations, there's clarity and there's this weight lifted off to where the elephant in the room is exposed and we can move forward, or it's something that I now have a skill set that I didn't think I would ever have or do. So those are the thoughts that I have right now on this.
Yeah, I love it. So, when we were talking about doing this and you came upon that quote, I love that you said, it's a mix between Disney, right? As change agents, both of us are heavily involved with bringing about change, innovating, coaching to change. And to your point, it is where the growth happens, where you're able to see possibilities that you weren't able to see prior to doing it. Because when you do it, you're creating some new experience that you hadn't had before and forming a new perspective and learning something about yourself that, I really can step into this new role, this new space. And maybe it's clunky at first, but I did it and I can do it. And I think back of all, we've worked together for many years now. And I think about all the things that we've stepped into, this podcast. I remember the first time we started talking about it, you had that nervous giggle, you're crazy, Roko, and even just who was going to kick it off, right? You led into it. I'll go first. And then I was like, oh, giddy. I think I've done it once. But at least we now know that we can do it, and we're making it our own, and it's been an iterative process, and we've learned along the way, and we've grown to the point now where the thought of speaking on camera or the thought of having a guest and being able to make an engaging conversation doesn't even pop into my head, at least. We've gone over that hump, like you said, of getting over that fear. And I think that is the magic, is there's this newfound confidence, there's this newfound, I'm stronger than I think I can, than I originally thought I was. I think that's the magic.
I appreciate that. It's interesting. It comes to mind. There's been coaching clients that I've had recently that are at different levels in leadership, and people get uncomfortable a lot of times with difficult conversations, right? It could be around performance evals. It could be around, I had one leader ask me, they said, it's about holding people accountable. And it was the conversation around accountability. This particular employee, clearly there were issues with, that they needed to deal with and document. And so I asked him, I said, so what's holding you back from a PIP, a performance improvement plan? And he just sat back because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for a leader. And I think part of the conversation we came to is, what narrative do you have going on in your head as to what happens when you basically, that's the next step, is a PIP. And he goes, well, she thought she was going to retire soon. So in his mind, putting someone on a performance improvement plan means I'm going to escort you out of the company. And I said, part of this uncomfortable thing is we need to wrap our brains around a different narrative. Because the narrative you have going right now is I'm going to escort him out of the building. And I said, the reality of it is if you put someone on a PEP, it's to help them get better in a very structured way with clear expectations. You're committing to support to guide them and develop them. And all of a sudden, the thing that was really uncomfortable became more comfortable and acceptable because we changed our perspective on it, right? So there's power in facing that stuff too. And I think back to the human experience is if we start to change our perspective on this thing that we're thinking about doing and this conversation we're going to have, and think about the upside of it and not the downside of it, all the negative stuff, I think that's when we get the courage to step into uncomfortable to create different outcomes.
Yeah. And the question that you asked to prompt that thinking was awesome, Michelle. It just, made the person reflect internally about what was that fear that they were feeling and what, again, it goes back to experiences, right? We've all had experiences, and maybe his experiences was, the PIPs were a way to get people out of the organization and not the perspective that you put forth of, no, you're committing to support them so that they can grow and flourish in our organization. So, again, those questions to prompt our thinking are what helps people get unstuck. But yeah, I mean, I lost my train of thought, but that's okay.
Oh, it's okay. I've done that a lot. I agree with you. And there was another leader, similar kind of thing. So we'll stay on this theme of and I think the theme is because when I go back to Bryan Stevenson and what we shared about the context of these 4 factors, right? What was around, get uncomfortable,
change the narrative.
Change the narrative. What was the 4th one? Proximity. Power of proximity is we need to at least recognize those things that could be holding us back, the uncomfortable part, and be able to surface what's causing the uncomfortableness of it, right? If that's even a word, to be able to step through into it and find another way. Because it was another leader that it was similar. It wasn't PIP, but it was the whole, and people are going through it now, performance reviews. The annual performance review can be scary.
The anxiety that is produced because of it. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Nothing should be a surprise.
No. And that was part of the conversation, right? Is that what concerns do you have, around this? Because there was a lot of uncomfortable stuff around it. And this particular situation, it was the person was a high performer before. She was going to give them strongly meets expectations, which is not bad. But what contributed to that is up until that point as a strong performer, they've been an individual contributor. They're now in a new role as a people leader, had never done the role before. They're 7 months in. And it's like, okay, so I'm going to give you a different perspective here. That 7 months in a new role, and they're doing great if they're getting a strong meets expectations when they've never done the job before, ever. So it's about, I'm going to say, pull the narrative in to figure out the power of being uncomfortable is realizing we're stepping into something we hadn't done before, right? And that's another quote. But being able to surface what it is and then shift to where we're looking at what's the upside of this.
Right.
Instead of just thinking, oh my God, and because we just think of all the stuff that could go wrong.
Right. Or just living in that space and not being willing to go beyond your comfort zone because you're unable to grow, or your life is passing you by because you're not growing. Right. I always think of that, that quote where, you can stand still, but but the rest of the world's going to keep moving, and you'll either be ran over or, you know, left behind. And so,
yeah, you're going to be back here and everybody else is running the race out front.
right. So if you want to stay pace, you've got to be willing to step out of that comfort zone and address what those fears are. But I think what I loved about the quote that you said is, you know, because one of the components of Bryan Stevenson's speech, and we'll talk about that in another podcast about bringing hope, right? The magic makes you think the other side is better. There's something more for you on the other side of that fear. And there's lots of possibilities. And, you know, while we think, yes, it's going to be great. And most of the time it is, there's no guarantee, right? It's going to be clunky. It's going to be messy as you go through it and learn it. But every change brings about some growth in you. You're going to learn something about yourself as you go through it. And to me, that's the true magic of it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I look back and I've shared it with people before. I know we did one on the power of facing your fears. I mean, literally, I was sharing with you, I did an event with 150 leaders in the room. No fear, no scare, no angst, nothing, right? And I look back at me from, if I hadn't stepped in and was uncomfortable, right? Basically comfortable getting uncomfortable, I couldn't have grown. I remember with Margie, the first time I had to step in and do a subset of the 2-day A3 thinking class that we did.
In front of 24 people.
Oh my God, it's 24 people. And it was 10 minutes. It was just 10 minutes. It wasn't 2 days in front of a room. Yeah. And I look back on that, and I mean, I had to acknowledge this does not feel, it's something I'd never done before. You know, I'm super uncomfortable, scared, every other thing that you can imagine, right? Like I'm being judged, whatever, you know, I'm not going to do a great job. But if I hadn't stepped into those things and gotten feedback, I wouldn't have been where I'm at now. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And when I think about, you know, the power in getting uncomfortable in today's world, it doesn't mean shooting people down and chastising or anything else, but it's about having the courage to have conversations and to be able to step in and support people that maybe it makes you a little uncomfortable because you hadn't done it before in that way. But there's learning in it, to your point. Yeah. And we have the opportunity to start changing the world that we live in, our world. It doesn't have to be the whole world,
right? Our
world.
And right. And I don't think we're suggesting either that you just dive right into the deep end without ever having swam before, right? There's preparation that you can do, but it's this belief that you can do something, you can move forward, and you plan and prepare for that change moment. So it's not,
I agree. We're definitely not advocating that you go out and do this crazy stuff that you've never done before. If you want to bungee jump, that's totally up to you. That's not the comfort zone that I'm going to penetrate anytime soon. Okay. But pick your stuff.
Right.
Pick your stuff. I want this one, last one is that you and I both liked is, when was the last time that you did something for the first time? And I think that would be a great question to ask ourselves, that if for some reason we may think we're stuck or we think we're okay, because the uncomfortable stuff are those first time things for the most part. I mean, there's other stuff that's going to be uncomfortable that you've done it before, but that's a surefire way for you to step in around getting uncomfortable is, I'm doing this for the first time. Yeah.
I love it. Great way to end.
So Roko, what's 1 or 2 things you want people to walk away with?
The magic is all about the self-learning. So getting uncomfortable helps you to learn more about yourself and give you confidence to continue and gain momentum on that.
I like that. For me, the thing that comes to mind is when recognize that that's what's going on, there's uncomfort, you know, to where you may want to turn around and walk the other way or pass on whatever's going on. But check in with yourself on the narrative and the dialogue and what's really happening, what's holding you back, so that you can surface that stuff and address it and then step into it. But yeah, that's where the growth happens. I mean, always. That's where growth happens.
Yes.
So this has been Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michele and the power of getting uncomfortable. I always appreciate being in the room with you. So thank you very much. Please like, share, subscribe. Until next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.